Well, let's do some day drinking. Cheers. Welcome back, everybody, to me doing the weekly navel-gazing, where we talk about all the books I read last week and all the books I plan to read this week and all the videos I made last week and all the videos I plan to make with this week, and then it all ends in rambling. And before we go any further, there is a poll down on the community tab around whether we'll do another something, whatever mass kind of thing, like we did Mouse Mass last year when we talked about Redwall books, and of course Drizzt Mass the year before, when I forced my way through like 13 Drizzt books by R.A. Salvatore. And the question right now is, should we do another one? And of course, if so, which ones? So there's a poll, you can go yes or no, and if you have suggestions for a series of books that we can talk about, one per day between Christmas and, Epiphany, roughly, then please put those into the comments. Ideally, it's something relatively short, I guess like 300 pages per book, something like that. Drizzt books and Redwall books give you a good sort of like rough idea of what kind of length we're talking about, and I'll be trying to talk about each of them, one book per day, and it doesn't have to be super heavy or anything of the sorts. Classics would be an option. Maybe Dragon Riders of Pern would be something like that, for example, or as I said, like last year, there is of course the idea of doing the Left Behind series by Tim LaHaye and whatever the other guy's name is, stuff like that. So if you have suggestions, put them in the comments. I'll leave the poll running until next week, I guess. And then I'll take all the suggestions and we'll make a poll about those, and you can vote on which ones which one to actually talk about if you decide that we want another something mass. So do that, please. It does help me sort of like plan ahead, because, if we're doing this, I need to get my hands on like 13 books, and that can take some time. So who knows? And now let's talk about all the books I read last week. And that's not exactly that many because I was sick. So I did read Dancing at the Edge of the World by Ursula Le Guin. The subtitle is, of course, Thoughts on Words, Women and Places, which is, once again, a collection of non-fiction on, gender, on writing, and on places. And it's, like all Ursula K. Le Guin, worth reading. Non-fiction, very much worth reading, obviously, because Le Guin's non-fiction is often, I feel, very accessible. And unlike, say, her fiction, whether it's her Hainish cycle for sci-fi stuff or her Earthsea cycle for fantasy stuff, for example, where she is sort of like tries to have a specific tone, and if you read something like From Elfland to Poughkeepsie, you will understand why she does sort of like try to stay within a specific tone. Her nonfiction doesn't have to do that, which allows her to be much more pointed in her remarks. She's certainly very she's able to pull some really, really funny jokes and also gets like very, very angry, and that makes those books, those essays, very much worth reading. There's some book reviews in there as well, so yeah, highly recommend that if you find it somewhere. Read more Ursula K. Le Guin nonfiction is my lesson here. What else did I read? Well, I did read Golgotha by Lavie Tidhar, which came out on Thursday, and I did enjoy it. No big surprise there. It's great. Yeah, not much more to say about that. It's great. I did reread, and I don't know if I want to, actually count this as a full book, but I did reread an essay by Walter Benjamin, and that is, of course, The Work of Art in the Age of Its Mechanical Reproducibility. What a title. I did read it in German because it's originally written in German from 1935, and it talks about like how our relation to art does change if art can be mechanically reproduced, whether that is through photography, film, music recordings, that kind of stuff, and how that changes our attitude and the way we deal with that kind of stuff. And that, it's definitely one of those absolute sort of like classics of 20th century philosophy, especially when it comes to philosophy of art and stuff like that. And I've read it numerous times, but from time to time I go back and reread it because it is, it helps me think through things from time to time. So that's something I read. And then I did reread Arama by Lavi Tidar, because, it came out in 2023, and before I make a video on Golgotha, I wanted to reread Arama to make sure that I get all the sort of like crossovers and overlaps between those books, because obviously Maror, Arama, and Golgotha are basically a trilogy of standalones that do have some overlap in characters and stuff like that, so I wanted to make sure, and Arama is still a very, very good book, and if you haven't read it yet, I highly recommend you do so. I mean, I highly recommend you read Maror, Arama, and Golgotha, because they are excellent books, but yeah, this is sort of what I read last week. So the question is, what am I going to read this week? And I don't fully know. What I'm reading right now is, of course, The Technology Trap: Capital, Labor and Power in the Age of Automation by one Karl Benedikt Frey. I assume he's German, or at least very clearly German ancestry, and it's a non-fiction book about the age of automation and how that does lead to problems and so forth. And as you can guess, that's additional reading for the whole like artificial intelligence video, because what generative AI and all forms of AI technology at the moment are is in fact just another step of automation. So looking at the sort of like larger labor impact of that kind of stuff, I think is important, and does look at something that a lot of people panicking about, say superintelligence and so forth, just forget. But like at its core, it's just another form of automation, and those come with enough trouble. So yeah, figured it might be worth reading. So that's what I'm doing. Beyond that, I don't know what I'll read this week. I am looking at, doing some rereading and so forth to actually get that fucking video recorded for artificial intelligence, and that may just mean me going back and rereading bits and pieces to make sure I get my stuff in order, but that's roughly where I'm at. If there's like other stuff I should read, then you can always tell me to go and do that, and I guess we'll find out what I figured out, what I decided to read next Monday when we come to that. So that's roughly where I'm at with reading right now. Videos. Well, I did make two. I did go for the A Reader's Favorite Song tag that Pat from Book Chat with Pat tagged me in, and it turned out to be a really long video, because if you force me to talk about music, I can talk for hours, which is, maybe a problem, who knows. And it did good. It did relatively well with views. It got like 2 comments, I think. So I was kind of surprised by, that relationship between like comments and views is always like a really interesting one. And for me personally, like comments are certainly more important and more impactful. So I don't know what went wrong there, or what, like, whether maybe none of you had anything to say about it, which is totally fine, right? Anyway, so that's a video I made, and then I made a video about friction and one of the problems with like the current like audiobook discourse, which I think lies in the way we deal with art, and maybe with artists behind the art, and how the technology that we're using these days to consume entertainment or art or whatever you want to call it does lead to that. And I'm relatively happy with that video. It came out really, really late last night because I fucked up. While rendering, I pressed the wrong key and had to start the render all over again. Luckily, I have problems with insomnia, so I accidentally woke up at like 3:40 or something in the morning and could just like upload the video, which is why it's still out there, and I did not wait until tomorrow for that. So it's a video, it's out there, watch it, comment on it, and notice how I managed to avoid all the Marxist language that I could have used to make the same point, which is, use value, exchange value, and how we split those two, and how we have a form of commodity fetishism which allows us to use, or consume entertainment without actually thinking about the people that the work process behind it that led to that. That's, Marxist terms. I did not use those because I figured it's much more fun if I hold up some old vinyl records and old audiobooks that I bought back in the day, and I think it's a pretty good video, so I don't know, go watch it. That's all the videos I made last week, because as I said, I was sick, and that means having a fucked up voice, and it's still not fully there, as you can probably hear, and that slowed down video recordings, which is why there is no video for Lucky Day by Chuck Tingle yet. Which brings me to videos for this week, and I guess there will be two. There will be one for Golgotha by Lavi Tidhar, and there will be one for Lucky Day by Chuck Tingle. I already have the thumbnails for both. I just need my voice to recover enough so I can sit down and record those videos. Maybe I'll record one tonight, so you can have one tomorrow. Or maybe I'll record it tomorrow and it'll be out on Wednesday, and ideally another one on Friday. You know, getting that whole like regular schedule in that YouTube always tells me I should do, which I usually don't. So that's two videos that I plan on making this week, definitely. There's a really good chance that we'll have to do the monthly live stream this weekend, the, what's that, like 23rd, 20th, something like that, because of reasons. Yeah, it must be the 20th, right? Because like the weekend after, I might be at a festival, help work at a festival and so forth, so probably not exactly the perfect time for streaming. So I'll figure that one out in the next couple of days, and if so, I'll let you know, and I'll try to set up the stream in advance, not like the last time where it, happened like a couple hours or so, and we'll have our regular monthly chat where we talk about books and stuff, and politics and so forth. And that is certainly something that I'm looking forward to as well. So those are our plans, and I will try to actually get back to the video on artificial intelligence, and that is, it's become quite the challenge for me. Like, I mean, I always talk about how I struggle with like perfectionism and stuff like that, and how it sometimes just takes longer for me to sit down and record a video, and I need to get my shit together and so forth. And ever since I decided to actually record the long explanatory videos out on my balcony, like I did for the anti-intellectualism video, ever since I did that, I obviously put myself up to more trouble, which means I have to pay attention to like the weather, because this is outside. I can't record while it's raining. I can't record necessarily when it's super noisy because there's construction going on or anything of the sort. So it limits my recording slots a bit more. And yeah, my plan was to record last week, but then, as I said, I had like fever and a cough and everything, and that is not exactly good for recording videos. So I had to wait. We'll see. Hopefully I'll get to recording some bits this week. I think I finally figured out how to do the whole thing. And that's kind of like one of my problems there, right? Because I already know there's like a book coming out that I wish I could have read before recording the video, and that is, of course, Gilded Rage, coming out in the first week of October, which is all about Elon Musk and the shift to the far right by tech billionaires and tech CEOs in Silicon Valley. And I think that's a really important book. I'm looking forward to reading it, but it, comes out in like 3 weeks. So should I wait until then? Probably not, because, time's flying and all of that. And that, I think, is like one of those problems that I have when I work on like a larger video, not just like a book video. Where it's like I'm reading a book and then I'm good, right? In this case, I'm reading Golgotha, and I decide that it's smart for me to reread Adama because I forgot some bits and pieces. I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna reread that book so I can make sure that I got everything. But it's a very limited scope. But with something like the anti-intellectualism video, or in this case the video on artificial intelligence, like there's so much stuff coming out, and the more I work on that, the longer I work on that, the more stuff is coming out, because it is like a current topic right now. So obviously there's more stuff coming out about this like all the fucking time, and that means those will never be like final thoughts on anything, because there is no finality to any of this, because it's an ongoing sort of like development in a lot of ways. And I guess I just like have to bite that bullet and decide to I guess I'm just going to talk about this and maybe just make a video about Gilded Rage when it comes out, if it's worth talking about, because, who knows? I certainly don't. Or I could, of course, just, actually, see if it's on NetGalley and actually finally make an account on NetGalley and see if I can get it this way, and, But that's like a very different thing. I'm always like careful with that, because I don't want to, necessarily take on any responsibilities for like reviews or anything of the sort, which kind of comes with like the NetGalley thing. So who knows? Gotta figure that one out. And in that regard, I mean, do I really have to read The Technology Trap to talk about artificial intelligence? Probably not, but like when it comes to that one sort of like part of my larger argument, so far I've mostly just read Blood in the Machine by Brian Merchant, which is great, but having like a second sort of book on the subject, having like a second source, would definitely make things better in that regard. So, it all comes back to that whole idea of like how much sort of like what's my personal sort of like expectations, what kind of bar or like what kind of expectation of quality do I have for my own videos in that regard. And I tend to overthink and overdo it usually. And being careful, I mean, doesn't hurt, right? Like, I remember like last week when I talked about the sort of like the response to Professor Dave, and I had like 2 other versions when I said like, well, there's another one talking about like the necessity for aggressive language when we talk and argue about and people within that culture war, whatever, or war on reality, whatever you want to call it. And I would call it like more of like a war on reality than a culture war at this point. And I thought about like recording that video. I still want to record that video, but like what with, events of the last week, I figured probably not the best time to talk about like why it's important to be harsh towards people on the political right. Because yes, I still believe that, but maybe wait a week or 2 for that. So sometimes maybe I'm too careful here. Maybe I'm just too slow. On the other hand, imagine I put that thing up on like Thursday, like a couple hours before Charlie Kirk got shot, and I like, here's my video talking about like why you need to insult booktubers or whatever, right? Would not have looked good, I think. So those are just like things that I'm currently sort of like trying to figure out, and I don't know what to do about all of that. I'll try to work on the artificial intelligence video as quickly as possible, because I want to get back to like the Mormonism video, and that's like one of those things, right? The last time I started working on the Mormon video, that's like half a year ago. And there's probably so many new books on the subject that came out between like January when I last looked at that kind of stuff, and now the project keeps growing. And that's like the problem with time, is that it never fucking stops, and the problem with that is that like everyone keeps publishing books, and if I want to be up to date with stuff, I don't know, it's just like one of those things. And Maybe I should look at the fact that like I don't get like a lot of comments on recent videos more as like encouragement to just like go ahead and make those videos, because like one of those big fears that I have with the larger videos is that someone will comment and go like, hey, but you forgot this important thing, and that makes your entire argument invalid, so you got to check your sources and actually do better research and whatnot. And I suspect that will never happen, but the fact that like even when I talk about something relatively easy, like, I don't know, music or whatever, right? There's no one commenting, then maybe no one would comment if I talk about like why artificial intelligence kind of sucks. Who knows? Maybe I should take that as an encouragement. And the thing is, like, as I said, making videos is like one thing, but like deep down for most of us, there is that sort of like wish or like for acknowledgement in one way or another. It's like knowing that people have watched it and engage with what I have to say. That's part of the thing, right? Like I don't just want to talk about stuff with like no one noticing, and in that regard I feel like comments are often more impactful, because they mean like someone has actually either ignored everything I said and still feels the need to yell at me, which sometimes happens, or people have like listened to what I said and like have like either agree with me or disagree with me, but like in a more like nuanced way, and then we can have like a conversation about stuff. Because not so much with like books, specific books, although there obviously I always love to talk about it, like aspects of books. That's why I started this channel originally, right? But when it comes to like the more like nuanced stuff or whatever, then I mean I put these things out because I feel we need to, in a lot of ways we need to be more aware of the situations we are in, because unless we understand like the time and place we are in, there's like no chance, we have like very little chance of actually changing the situation that we are in. And I assume that most of us realize that there's a lot of stuff that needs changing in the world right now. So that's usually something that comes with that, and that's why I personally mostly look at like comments and not like at views or at likes. And obviously, those are nice, and presumably the algorithm still does pay attention to that kind of stuff. But for me, comments are often like the main sort of like feedback thing that I'm interested in. And I understand it's a problem, right? Like I don't comment like a lot because sometimes it just feels like too much bother, right? I'm lazy, and typing comments feels like work, and stuff like that. So I'm part of the problem there, is what I'm saying. I think it also just lies in the way that like YouTube is formatted, and that YouTube comments are formatted, and that you don't have like, I don't know, I don't think it's the best sort of like format to facilitate conversations between people in the way that just like comments are framed and built up. So there is that, and I don't know what to do about that. It's just like something that I'm also thinking about, like how technology works, because, you know, I go and do all of these like YouTube training sessions where they teach us about like how to do live streams and how to do how to deal with the YouTube algorithm or whatever, and those are obviously really interesting because while they may not necessarily help me personally, and they rarely do, they at least show me what YouTube thinks YouTubers should be doing. And that is interesting in itself, because it teaches me something about the platform. It also teaches me something about a lot of the people that are doing YouTube things right now, and think about it much more competitively and go like, well, so does this actually, if I press this one button, does this change my income minimum, like by fractions of cents, or does this work? And I'm like, I don't think about it that way, right? Like, I make videos about stuff that I'm interested in, and yes, it's nice if I, you know, get like feedback and so forth. But like that's what I want. Like the actual numbers and the money in particular just doesn't, you know. I mean, because it is so negligible at this point that, you know, why would I care about like whether I make like $10 per month or like $10.50 per month, which is roughly where my monthly income through YouTube is at the moment, right? It's like somewhere between 10 and 12 euros, depending on, you know, the month and the amount of videos I manage to put out. But that's the kind of money we're talking about here, right? So why would I actually bend over backwards to make sure that like maybe I can reach, you know, maybe 30 euros? Does that make a massive difference? No, because I only get paid like once that money reaches 70 euros, and that's like once per year, maybe twice per year if I'm lucky, right? So why would I care, is what I'm saying. And yeah, so seeing those kind of ways people use the platform, presumably more successfully, is interesting in its own way, because it does often annoy me and frustrate me, because I'm like, that's very much a way to keep like YouTube go down a very specific path that leads to very little sort of like actual worthwhile information or anything shared. And one of the things that I really appreciate about YouTube in particular is that it is a platform that allows us still relatively easily. I mean, obviously there's all kinds of problems with YouTube stuff going on, and you know about that if you watch any other YouTube, right? How it's now censoring, or at least using AI to detect whether someone is underage, which is one of the things that YouTube is doing now, and then hiding and automatically preventing them from watching videos YouTube deems to be only fit for adult people. And because it's just AI, it's not like any form of verification, which comes with its own like problems, when, you know, might be something to talk about during the live stream or whatever, right? What it does, it just like clicks that and, you know, restricts your account without you noticing, right? And suddenly you don't get anything about politics, you don't get anything about, say, sexuality, and that could be just like medical information or anything of the sort. You just get like all of these things are suddenly hidden from you, and that is fucked up, right? So seeing all of these things is interesting to me, but my personal thing why I like YouTube in particular is that it can allow us to sort of democratize education, democratize the spreading of knowledge. It obviously is highly successful at like misinformation and all of that kind of stuff, but it can also be used to do that. And that's like one of the things I try to do with those longer videos, which is why I add those long lists of like those long bibliographies. That's partly to show you that I've, you know, based my arguments on sources, but it's also like, hey, if you feel like reading any of these books, you should probably do that, because they are, at least some of them are really, really helpful. And that kind of like, that potential is still in the internet, right? On the internet, the internet still has that potential, and YouTube still does have that potential up to a point. There are obviously other like less strictly capitalist systems out there on the internet still somewhere that do that better, I guess. But YouTube has like the reach, YouTube has the size, and that also matters, right? And by focusing too heavily on like numbers and focusing too heavily on like how to optimize content to maximize income, you definitely have to make a lot of compromise that reduce that that potential for education, that potential for making the world a better place. And that's sometimes why I do things the way I do, because it feels right to me, and I don't care about like whether that is what YouTube thinks or not. And sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't. Anyway, that's a lot of like rambling for today, and I hope you had a good week. I hope you did watch some cool videos. I hope you watched some good movies. I hope you did read some really good books and had a good time despite everything going on in the world right now. And I don't know, like, subscribe, comment. Don't forget to go to that poll and vote whether we should do another something mass. And if you have suggestions, put them in the comments. And have a look at whether we'll do the live stream this weekend. And I don't know, like, subscribe, share this, join the Patreon if you feel like it. You don't have to join the channel if you feel like it. You don't have to. Most importantly, be good people. I'll see you in the next one. And until then, thanks and cheers.